human rights violations and human rights crimes. And then, in a kind of novelty, Arabs came to be accused of being either literally the perpetrators of the final solution or the lineal descendants of the Nazis. There's a vast literature on that topic. 1948, Israel's Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, he says of the Arabs that they are, quote, disciples and even teachers of Hitler, who know only one way of solving the Jewish problem, total destruction. During the Eichmann trial, the Palestinian leader during the 1930s, he was a nasty person, no question about it, the Mufti of Jerusalem, but he metamorphosed into, quote, among the biggest Nazi war criminals and the real mastermind of the final solution. Then in 1967, the president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, he became Hitler. For those of you who know, it's true. I mean, there's actually, I was rereading the other night Tom Segeb's new book on the 1967 war. Anyone here read it? It's not without interest. And Tom Segeb is an Israeli journalist for Haaretz. And he has a whole section running to around 10 or 15 pages entitled Nasser is Hitler. That was the claim that was made during the 67 war. Now we're coming up to the present, where the younger people will have better memories. 1991, it was said that Saddam Hussein was Hitler. Then in 2002, on the eve of the attack on Iraq, the illegal aggression against Iraq, it was said again that Saddam Hussein was Hitler. We were told that anyone who opposed the illegal U.S. war against Iraq was an appeaser of Hitler, like the appeasers of Chamberlain-like appeasers of Hitler in the 1930s. Now, if you look at mainstream publications, we're told that Hamas is Hitler, Hezbollah is Hitler, Iran is Hitler, Ahmadinejad is Hitler. It's a kind of funny thing, because on the one hand, you're told that you can't compare the Nazi Holocaust with any other crime in the history of the world, and if you compare, you're guilty of Holocaust minimization, Holocaust denial, and you become a Holocaust denier. But then on the other hand, all of Israel's enemies, all of the US's enemies are always compared to Hitler. It's hard to think of a single enemy of the US who's not accused, and of Israel, that's not accused of being Hitler, a new Hitler, and threatening a new Holocaust. The most recent version of this, sure it's been popular in Canada, actually, I know because I follow it fairly closely, is this case of a new anti-Semitism. The belief that there has been a resurgence of a Hitler-like anti-Semitism in the Western world, Europe and North America, that were, as I like to say, Nazi Germany, 1938 again, and you can see the smokestacks on the horizon. That's what we're told. Well, this has just been another standard ploy, fairly commonplace, in order to deflect attention from Israel's actual record whenever Israel comes under international pressure to try to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict diplomatically, or wherever Israel commits egregious human rights violations and it has to conceal them. Whenever that happens, you hear this cry of a new anti-Semitism. It's, as I said, easily documented. University of Ottawa, I'm sure, has a solid library. Am I wrong there? No? Reasonable library? No? Okay. Well, if you happen one day to take a little class trip to a nice library, you can enter under subject heading, The New Anti-Semitism. And you'll come up with a book not from 2006, not from 2001. You'll come up with a book from as far back as 1974. 1974, the main Jewish apologists for Israel, the Anti-Defamation League, they put out a book called The New Anti-Semitism. 1982, they put out another book called The Real Anti-Semitism. What's his thesis? The thesis is there's a new anti-Semitism. Every time Israel has a problem, public relations problem, too much diplomatic pressure to resolve the conflict, this extravaganza is revived called the new anti-Semitism. Is there any evidence for it, this new anti-Semitism? Well, here, you don't have to take my word for it, and you should never take my word for anything. I don't believe in that. I'm old-fashioned 1960s. We used to wear a button that used to say, question authority. I think that's a wise motto. Karl Marx, who was a nice Jewish boy and a very smart Jewish boy, he was once asked, what's the credo by which he lives? And he answered, because he was a smart Jewish boy, he said in Latin, de omnibus dubitandum, which means?
Doubt everything.
Doubt everything, exactly right. So instead of basing yourself on my remarks, use your own, your own reflective capacities. Because the claim was made that the heart of this new anti-Semitism in North America were the college campuses. That the college campuses were rife with a new anti-Semitism, that there were pogroms, we were told, pogroms, riots occurring in college campuses in which Jews were being beaten and so forth. I have to say, on first hearing of these claims, I found them slightly implausible. I've taught at many universities. It's not a badge of honor. The more universities you've taught at when you're an academic, the more people begin to question your bona fides as a scholar. But I've been around the block many times, though I think now the block has come to an end. I didn't hear any applause for that. No, I mean by those who are glad it's coming. Because I saw the organizer of this event applauding that. Maybe it came out wrong in the French translation. In any event, I've taught at many universities, and for better or for worse, one thing you could say about North American universities is that they're so politically correct that you can't be anti-anything. You can't be, for sure, you can't be anti-black, anti-Puerto Rican, anti-Chicano. You certainly can't be anti-gay, anti-straight. You can't be anti-tall, you can't be anti-short, you can't be anti-fat, anti-skinny. You can't even be anti-downright ugly. This is political correctness. So it was kind of odd to be reading amid all of this sometimes stifling, sometimes suffocating political correctness, that there was rampant anti-Semitism on college campuses. That just didn't see, as the lawyers like to say, prima facie, on its face. That didn't seem plausible. And when I went through the record, and I did for a book I wrote, it was clear that there was no merit whatever. Most of the incidents of an alleged new anti-Semitism were simply fabricated. And now it's pretty much admitted that the whole thing was a fraud. So you take the Chronicle of Higher Education, it writes in a recent article, it's a good time to be a Jewish student at an American college, which is, of course, what any rational person would conclude based on his or her experience. The head of Hillel, the main Jewish organization on college campuses, said, quote, it's a golden age of Jewishness on campuses. The main Israeli lobbying organization, AIPAC, said, quote, it's a glorious time, not only for Jewish student life on campuses, but for the pro-Israel student movement as well. There's no evidence whatever of a new anti-Semitism in North America. Okay, but then some of you are saying, what about Europe? Isn't it different there? France, Germany, England, we're told, this resurgent Hitler-like anti-Semitism. I did check through the record on that, couldn't find any evidence, but of course many of you may think, fairly I think, that, well, Finkelstein, of course he didn't find evidence because it was Finkelstein looking for the evidence. So, let's take the world's leading Zionist historian, Walter Laqueur. He came out with a book in 2006, the title, The Changing Face of Anti-Semitism. And what does Walter Laqueur, the world's leading Zionist historian, find in his book, published by Oxford University Press? He says, quote, popular attitudes towards Jews in Europe were in fact slightly more favorable in 2002 than they had been in 1991. That is to say, according to the world's leading Zionist historian, not only is there no evidence of a new anti-Semitism in Europe, popular attitudes are now more favorable to Jews than ever before. If we were to take these claims of a new anti-Semitism, a new Hitler-like anti-Semitism in Europe, if we were to take these claims at their word, we'd be forced to draw very curious conclusions. So, it was recently reported in February 2007 that 3/4 of Israelis want to be in the European Union, and 1/10 would actually leave Israel for Europe if they were granted, if they were granted EU citizenship. So, what do we conclude? We're told that there is a Hitler-like anti-Semitism now resurging in Europe. That would mean 3/4 of Israelis want Israel to ally with Nazis. And 1 in every 10 Israelis wants to be exterminated. Because 1 in every 10 wants to move to Europe, this Hitler-like Nazi anti-Semitism notwithstanding. Returning to the real world, what's the purpose of these claims of a new anti-Semitism? Well, number 1, to turn the perpetrator, namely Israel and its apologists, into the victim, focusing on the alleged suffering of Jews today, rather than the very real suffering of Palestinians. And number 2, the second purpose is to discredit all criticism of Israel as being motivated by anti-Semitism. And that will bring me to the last part of my remarks and the title of today's talk. Namely, what I just said is again not a matter of speculation. We have a very vivid example of what happened and, crucially, what failed. Namely, about a year ago now, the former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, and he is reputed to be the most respected ex-president of the United States, meaning he wasn't popular as a president, but after his presidency, he gained an impressive reputation, judging by polls in the United States. Carter comes out with a book entitled Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And the book immediately evoked this hysteria in the United States, not least because of the title of the book, the placement of the word apartheid in the title. In fact, there's nothing controversial at all about referring to Israeli policies in the occupied territories as apartheid. I would be happy during questions and answers to give you the specific citations and references, but time doesn't allow me now. Israel's main human rights organization, B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, has repeatedly referred to Israeli policies in the occupied territory as apartheid-like. Israel's former Israel's former Attorney General, Michael Ben Yair, referred to Israeli policies as apartheid. Israel's former deputy mayor